So here are some of these ideas. Whoever ends up running, says Ben Judah, a federal jobs guarantee is the big idea already set to dominate the Democratic primaries in 2020. This simple idea would see the government guarantee a job to 13.1 million Americans who are currently unemployed or underemployed. The go-to report on the topic from the Center on Budget Policy Priorities suggests a guaranteed wage which would go with each one of these jobs to the tune of $32,500. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about this. So, after reading Ben Judah's stunning piece on the brilliant ideas that I am ignoring, apparently, I actually went and I read the entire Center on Budget and Policy Priorities piece on why we need a federal job guarantee. The piece is by Mark Paul, William Darity Jr., and Derek Hamilton. And here is what the piece says. The piece says that we need full employment brought to you by the permanent establishment of a National Investment Employment Corps. The NIEC will provide universal job coverage for all adult Americans. The permanent establishment of the NIEC would eliminate involuntary unemployment. The elimination of poverty wages through the pay structure of the NIEC. First of all, what jobs would they be doing? They'd be doing all infrastructure jobs. So does this sound like a new idea to you? Infrastructure jobs paid for by the government? It seems to me that every single politician ever has proposed this, including Donald Trump. Every one of them. Bernie Sanders proposed it. Barack Obama proposed it. This is what the stimulus package was supposed to do. It was a giant fail. FDR did this as well. Virtually every president talks about the need for infrastructure. Let's just hire 1 million people and go build some roads. It turns out those are temporary jobs. And then unless you have a plan to keep those people permanently on the government payroll, those people are going to end up doing make-work projects. It's going to be a tax suck from people who work to people who are doing jobs that are more useless. It is mudslinging jobs. It is digging a hole and filling that hole back in. That's what all these jobs end up being, or at least a lot of them. Okay, so here's what the report continues. It would eliminate poverty wages through the pay structure of the NIEC. The federal job guarantee would provide a job at a minimum annual wage of $24,600 for full-time workers, poverty line for a family of 4, and a minimum hourly wage of $11.83. Well, isn't that weird? I thought Democrats were calling for a $15 minimum wage. I guess now it's only just $11.83 when it's the federal government doing it. So the federal government will pay you $12 an hour, but the private sector will have to pay you $15 an hour. Is it just me, or does that make the private sector somewhat less competitive? Maybe there's another agenda here. They say workers would have the opportunity to advance within the program, rising from minimum wage in the program to an estimated mean salary of $32,500. The wage would be indexed to the inflation rate to ensure that the purchasing power of enrollees is maintained, and the wage will vary to allow for some degree of regional variation. The minimum wage rate in the program will also rise to meet the national minimum wage if it were to exceed the wage rate recommended here. So that rate of wage would continue to rise, paid for by the government as inflation increases. Well, there are a couple of problems with this. Okay, one of the problems is that taking money and injecting it into the system via government spending immediately creates a certain level of price inflation, which means you're going to have to increase the minimum wage as well that you're paying the members of the government, right? These new government workers. If you increase prices and everything is indexed to price inflation, not to actual monetary inflation, to price inflation, then this wage will continue to rise and rise and rise, pushing up pushing up price inflation, and then pushing up the wage that has to be paid for by the federal government. This would also include fringe benefits. To provide a true non-poverty wage and meet the fundamental rights of American citizens, the policy would include health insurance for all full-time workers in the program. So it's not $32,500 a year, it's $43,000 a year that the federal government is going to pay all of these people for make-work programs. And then most of the report is a long rant about how great FDR was, even though FDR was basically garbage when it came to the economy. My favorite part of this is when they say this. They need a true floor in the labor market. While minimum and living wage laws have historically been implemented to place a floor in the labor market, they fail to provide viable pathways to employment or out of poverty for those looking for work but unable to obtain employment in the first place. The job guarantee would function as a de facto floor in the labor market, greatly increasing the bargaining position of workers throughout the economy. What they're saying is that if you can get $12 an hour from the federal government, you're not going to work for $7 an hour or $8 an hour over at the local McDonald's, which is true. That also means that it's going to be an increased cost to businesses, private businesses. Those private businesses are then going to have to increase their prices to consumers, which is going to create exactly the price inflation that leads to that spiral I was talking about before. Beyond that, it is also going to lead to increased costs that is going to lead to layoff of workers. Where will those workers go, you ask? Oh, they'll go work for the federal employment program. Look how magical this is, right? You're going to create a higher necessity for wages in the private sector by creating an artificial floor for wages. And then when people are laid off, they will then work for the federal government. And then when the federal government continues to increase its wages to deal with the price inflation that's happening thanks to its own regulations, then more workers will be laid off. Yeah, I can't see how this is going to go wrong in any way.